This presentation was first delivered as part of the Time to Change Employer Masterclass on leadership and culture change in September 2020. We hope you find it useful. Cool. So first of all, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for giving up some of your time this afternoon, possibly your lunch break, to be here with us. It would have been, of course, much nicer to have seen everyone in person as we used to do. For obvious reasons, that's not possible at the moment, and in all likelihood for the foreseeable. But what we are really keen to do is to follow through on our commitment in delivering a series of masterclasses from now until the end of the year for you. And really, I think the best way for us to do that is in this format. So we've simplified things a little bit. We have a guest speaker who I'll introduce shortly, but we hope you still take some value from this, and then perhaps down the line we'll get to see you in person again. So just a quick run through of the agenda for today, just so you know what to expect. So first of all, introductions. My name's Ian. Some of you may know me already. I think I've seen some familiar faces and names already come into the room, so really good to see you. And if I haven't met you before, then nice to meet you now. My role here with Time to Change is Employer Engagement Manager. So I would have worked previously with many of you on your action plans and developing those and getting them signed off. You've also heard already from my colleague Runa in the background. So Runa's kindly offered to facilitate for us today. Some of you, again, might know Runa previously. She's our champion training manager, and Runa is in charge of delivering all of our training programs. Again, some of you may have already gone through the training programs. If you haven't, of course, there is still an opportunity to do that. So what I would suggest is just reaching out to us after the session today, if that's something you're interested in, and we can pick up the conversation from there. We're shortly going to be hearing from our guest speaker today. Jess Badley from Blood Cancer UK has very kindly given up a lot of her time to develop a presentation and to deliver that today. And then after that presentation, there is going to be an opportunity, as promised, for a Q&A before we wrap up. So just a little bit of housekeeping. I'm sure everyone in here, thanks to the circumstances over the last 6-7 months, is very much au fait with video conferencing and various different platforms by now. But the golden rule, as we all know, of Zoom is to please mute yourself. You should be muted by default, but just be mindful of that if you can, please. It makes life much easier for whoever's presenting, and of course, it's a better experience for the audience and participants. We do have the Q&A session, so if anyone has a question, what I would ask is if you could, while Jess is delivering her presentation, just to drop that in the chat box. So as I said earlier, it should be at the top or the bottom of your screen, depending on what device you're using. Just pop your questions in there for me, and then at the end, we'll be able to facilitate those to Jess. Again, as I mentioned, Runa's here for any tech issues, so please use the chat feature for that. You can drop her a direct message just to make things a little easier and a little bit tidier. And then lastly, just a quick note that this presentation is going to be recorded. It is being recorded currently and will be uploaded to the Time to Change website. So you will have a chance to revisit anything that you didn't catch, and perhaps share with colleagues if you wish to do so as well. So before I hand over to Jess, our guest speaker, I just really want to touch on why we've chosen this theme and why we feel it's so important. We ran our last digital masterclass in May, and we asked for a little bit of feedback off the back of that, really, in terms of what employers would like to hear about from next or today. And this was really the top theme that came out for us. So it's something obviously that we felt that employers wanted to know a little bit more about. And I just want to kind of touch on a few different points as to why we feel it's so important as well. And you can see those on the screen there. So senior leaders, they should play a key role in creating change by ensuring reliable processes, checks, and action plans are in place, which are regularly monitored. So I suppose what we're talking about here essentially is accountability. You know, as with any other initiative that you're trying to roll out and develop in a business, whether that's to do with wellness or whether it's a more specific business initiative, of course you need to buy in from senior management from the start. So it's that accountability piece there. The second point there is that they also play a key role in progressing the mental health agenda within organizations. Colleagues take cues from how leaders behave. So very simply, I guess, to to look at that another way, it's about leading by example. And everyone in here would have developed an action plan before they signed the Time to Change Employer Pledge. And I'm sure you'll remember that one of the key points that we try to stress really is about gaining buy-in from the start, but asking your senior team to share their own lived experience of mental health where possible. And again, leading by example, that really sets a positive precedent from the outset, from the moment you sign the pledge and then going forwards through a series of different mediums like blogs or various kind of social media platforms. And it kind of opens the door to colleagues throughout the rest of the organization to do exactly that and to be comfortable discussing mental health and wellness. And then demonstrating that your senior leaders are committed to addressing mental health and mental health stigma and discrimination specifically. So really, I suppose just a kind of summary of the 2 points above, but the key thing here is that what we're talking about is mental health stigma specifically. So it's far easier to have a conversation around kind of general wellness or well-being in the organization. I think most of us are very comfortable with that, but it's another thing to really kind of ask our senior team to look at mental health stigma and to really address that. So I'm going to very shortly hand over to Jess from Blood Cancer UK, but just to introduce Jess, I'm sure most of us, perhaps all of us, will be familiar with Blood Cancer UK. They did previously go under the name of Bloodwise, I think, until March of this year. I think I'm right in saying, Jess will correct me if I'm wrong. Jess is the head of HR at Bloodwise and also head of organisational development, and was also the pledge lead when developing the action plan. And Blood Cancer UK signed the employer pledge in April of this year. I did work with Jess in developing the action plan, and I know firsthand, obviously, that Jess really worked hard on developing some brilliant mental health and wellness initiatives throughout. But I think it's probably more interesting if I hand over to Jess herself and let her tell you a little bit more about those, if possible. So Jess, if you're still there, I will let you take over the screen share.
Okay, hopefully you can see my screen now. Great. So thank you so much for inviting me today, and thank you to everyone who's come along. Hopefully some of the ideas I'm going to share will be helpful, and hopefully you'll all have some to share at the end as well. So as Ian said, I am head of HR and OD at Blood Cancer UK. And just to give you an overview of our organisation, so you have the context of what we've been working around. Our aim as a charity is to beat blood cancer, nice and easy, and we do this by funding research that takes us closer to a cure. And our overall aim is that we will do this within our generation. Been around since 1960, and so 60-year anniversary this year. In that time, we've invested over 500 million into that research. So we've been able to transform some treatments and, of course, save lives. Our staff team is spread across the UK. We do have 2 hub offices, so one in London and one in Edinburgh, but actually we've really embraced agile working, and so a lot of our staff team before COVID were actually starting to work from home, work from coffee shops, etc., rather than having to work from an office. So we are, of course, now all working remotely, but even at some point in the future, when we're able to all go back to an office, that will be if people want to. So we are not expecting all to be in one place, and I'll explain why potentially that makes things both easier and more challenging later on. And we signed the Time to Change pledge in April of this year. I have a screenshot of our pledge signing, and it's really just to demonstrate one of the points I'm going to talk about later, which is how things can change so quickly. So we all know 2020 has been a year of that. We had a whole plan around our pledge signing, which was we were going to do it at Staff Away Day. Everyone was going to be there in person on the 31st of March. We were going to have balloons, party poppers, you name it. We were going to go full out. And then obviously that didn't happen. 31st of March was not a day we were able to do a Staff Away Day. But we didn't want to lose this. And so we did it online. And so I thought I'd just share the screenshot. So you can see in the bottom corner, that's our Chief Executive, Gemma Peters. And so we got her and our chair to sign the pledge online, which in itself took us a little while. Better at that now, but it took us a little while just to do that. And then we did it at an all-staff meeting instead. Just to give you an overview of what I'll cover it over the next few minutes. So I'll start with how we gained the buy-in from our senior management and leadership team. and then spend a bit of time talking about how we created the right conditions for culture change, because it was a culture change, still is, and that's ongoing. Then I'll talk a bit around how we've created a guiding coalition and how we see that going forward. A little bit about the change management process itself, and also just to finish off with the challenges we've faced so far. I'd love to say that it was all plain sailing, and a lot of the time we've been really lucky in the staff team that we have. But of course, as we know, this year has been tricky, so I thought it might be useful to share some of the ways we've tried to overcome that. So to start with then, gaining the buy-in from the senior management and leadership team. So I started at Blood Cancer UK right at the start of December 2019. So when I did join, I could see that we had an employee assistance programme, an EAP, which probably most of you have. And that was not everything. We did have some mental health first aiders in place as well, but they were both things that people didn't really know about. So it wasn't starting from scratch, but it wasn't far off, I would say. And I knew it was something that I've been passionate about, is something that I've done in other organisations, and so for me it was a priority coming into the organisation. So the first thing I did was just think about what I know about the leadership team. What do they need? What convinces them to get on board with things? So in previous organisations, it has been much more led by facts and figures. So what is the business case for doing this? If you're going to invest, why would the board agree that? Why would your leadership team agree it? And I would say you're probably all very familiar with it, but the Farmer and Stevenson report that came out a couple of years ago, there is so many stats in there. If you need anything like a business case, that plus all the stuff on the Time to Change website, I would say is really great if you've got a team that need facts and figures. For us at Blood Cancer UK though, actually, while we are data driven, we're also really driven by stories. So to get those in place, I looked at what we had, our existing information about our staff team. So we did have some data on our staff sickness, but as I think most people would agree, it's not the most exciting of things to share with people, probably not the most convincing argument. Useful if you can see that there's an issue you want to solve, but actually what worked better for us was the feedback we had from our staff team. So both from our employees, so we do staff surveys. We don't recognise unions. We are quite a small organisation, and what that does mean for us is that we just communicate directly with our staff. But if you do work with unions, obviously you have union reps, etc., and I would say they would be a really good way to get information as well. And the other really key things that came through for me in the stories was talking to line managers. And I think actually everywhere I've worked, I've had line managers who really think that well-being is important, really think mental health is important. But I would say 90% of the time, they're really worried they're going to say something wrong. They're really worried that they just don't have the training or the knowledge to be able to help their staff. And again, this came through really clearly when I started Blood Cancer UK. And that, plus the employees telling their stories about not always what stigma they'd faced, but definitely stigma around being able to say that they might have a mental health condition, or being able to say, I feel really stressed because of my workload at the moment. Those two together made a really, really strong case for us. And actually, I was really lucky at Blood Cancer UK. I went to the leadership team and said, this is what I think we should do and this is why. And I had no issue getting that through whatsoever. So as I say, I was lucky, but if you need stats and things like that, there is loads of it out there to use. In terms of the line managers then, because obviously it's one thing doing your pledge signing in front of everybody, it's another thing then to get the momentum going and people to get involved. Line managers were my first port of call because, as I said, I talked to them and I knew that they were saying, yeah, this sounds great, Jess, but help, I don't know what to do. If someone came to me and said, I'm struggling with my mental health, I would say, go and talk to Jess in HR. And while of course that's fine, that can't be the only thing that happens. So what we did was provide training for line managers around mental health really early on. And it was as practical as we could make it. And we've always said to them, you absolutely don't need to be an expert in this. You need to listen and you need to know what you can signpost people to. But the most important thing is listening, because that staff member can often tell you what support might be useful for them. And actually that has proved to be the case. We've definitely found with our line managers that doing, I think in total we did 3 hours worth of training. It wasn't mandatory because I generally don't like doing mandatory training, but we did have a 92% attendance rate. So clearly that was working for people. It was something they were interested in. And we do have mental health first aiders as well as me within the HR team. So there is more experienced staff they can go to for help if they need it. Our overall plan is still based on evidence. And as I said, the Stevenson Pharma report, Thriving at Work, that was key for us. We also used the 5 ways to wellbeing and, of course, all the time to change resources as well. In terms of the culture change then and getting those right conditions for it to happen, I've got a couple of slides here because this is probably one of the things we spent the most time on. And the first thing was explaining why. So some of you might have heard Simon Sinek. You might have seen him on LinkedIn. He's done quite a lot of podcasts, and he always talks about explain the why. Why are you doing it before explaining what you're going to do? And actually, if there's any comms specialists in the room, you'll be able to give me a better figure. But there's some stats that go around that say if you want a message to go across, you need to tell people anywhere between 7 and 13 times. So I think for us that we definitely found that. Sometimes it feels a bit like you're saying the same thing all the time. But actually, I think from experience, just keep going with it because there's always someone that didn't hear you last time or it didn't quite sink in. So explaining why we thought mental health was a topic we wanted to talk about is still something we're doing several months down the line. Getting our senior leaders involved was a really great step as well. So again, they were really happy that we went ahead and did it. But the next step up, and one that's been really great for us, is getting them to talk about mental health themselves as well. So our executive team are really great and have really embraced this. And so at the moment, we are going through a redundancy process, unfortunately. I hope that not many of you are going through the same thing, but potentially you are. And as part of that, we have had the exec team. They have open door sessions every week, but they have said every week when we have a team meeting, they've said in that, my open door session is coming up. Come and talk to me about anything. And that could be around how you're feeling right now. So if you're struggling with your mental health, come and talk to me. So that invitation is always there at a really senior level. As well as offering that chance to listen, we've also had the exec team and we had our chair of trustees talk about their own experience of mental health as well. And again, that's been incredibly powerful in breaking down the stigma around talking around mental health. So at our pledge signing, for example, we couldn't do what we wanted, but what we did do and what worked actually really well, we have a Wednesday morning meeting, everyone logs in virtually, and our CEO Gemma talked around mental health and wellbeing and how it links into our organisational values. And then our chair of trustees gave his, I guess, personal experience around mental health. And that was so powerful because actually what he said was for years and years and years, he works in a corporate culture, and he said for years, I wasn't really into this wellbeing stuff. But actually over the past few years, I've come to see how important it is. And I think it's great that as a staff team, that we're all talking about this. And so obviously the impact for our staff members, seeing the chair of our trustee board saying that, was really powerful. And we had a lot of feedback, people saying, you know, that's so great he was prepared to be so open and talk about his own mental health. So I think if you can get your leadership team to do that, that has proved really, really powerful for us, one of the most powerful things that we've done. And another way that our exec team share their stories is through something called Schwartz rounds. So if there's anyone from the NHS on the call, you'll know what these are. If not though, a Schwartz round, they are used mainly in the NHS, but we use them as a charity and some of you might do as well. Essentially a Schwartz round is a space, normally it's about an hour, and you might have 2 or 3 speakers on a particular theme. So it could be change, or it could be dealing with mental health. And those speakers share a personal story, and then people reflect on the emotional impact of that. So it's not around problem solving at all. It is just all about thinking about your emotions and your feelings, allowing yourself to sit with those. And again, we've had our exec team come along as speakers in those Schwartz rounds, and the whole staff team can attend those. So again, it's really personal stories, and people being really quite vulnerable when they're sharing those, and again, has been really helpful in breaking down stigma. And then I think as well, for the rest of the leadership team, including myself, being a really authentic role model. So again, it wouldn't be that useful, I don't think, if I just said to the staff team, yeah, we're going to do all this mental health stuff, here's a template of your wellness action plan, off you go. Some people might have done it, but what I thought would be more helpful is if actually I attended team meetings to talk about wellness action plans and share mine in advance, because I think, and probably most of you might find the same thing, mental health is always going to be a topic some people find difficult to speak about. And so from my point of view, I just thought, if I'm saying to people, I want you to, share yourself, share some vulnerable things, potentially write them down and share them with your manager and your team, I need to show that I'm prepared to do that. So anyone in the organisation could read my wellness action plan, for example. It's just on Teams and on our SharePoint. Anyone can use it and see it, and hopefully inspire them to feel comfortable to start doing that as well. And obviously the other side of that is also personally sharing, when either myself or on the leadership team, if as senior leaders you're not feeling great, actually sharing that. And I think for me that's probably been the hardest thing. I'm very happy to talk about mental health, and I'm very happy to support other people, and there's still that thing sometimes in the back of my brain, if someone says, how are you, my instinct is to go, yeah, I'm fine, I'm absolutely fine, I'm head of HR, I should be fine. But actually that can never be the case for anyone. And so for me, I guess I built up slowly. So within the HR team, every time we have a team meeting, we do a check-in as our first thing, score 1 to 10 and why. And then really I've just built on that personally. It might be that you're the sort of person that is actually really happy to share. And if you are, then you're really lucky, because the rest of us, it is not always so easy. But again, if you're trying to role model people feeling comfortable about talking around their mental health, I do think you need to lead that from the front. And then, like I said, talking about mental health often. So every Wednesday morning we have an all staff meeting. It is really rare that at some point wellbeing or mental health isn't mentioned in one context or another. And one of the ways that I knew that we were starting to embed this in the organisation is that other staff, without me prompting, start to talk about mental health. On our away days, we normally do 2 a year. We've now got a section on each of those which focuses on something around wellbeing and mental health. And we also have a weekly HR update. So it's just an email that goes out on a Friday, any organisational developments, but we also always have something around mental health in there. And it always has the next available dates for the mental health first aiders, because we offer drop-in sessions as well as just being available. So every Friday and every Wednesday, there is some reminder about mental health. Other things we've done as well, so we wanted to create some resources which were really easy to access. So we didn't want to have passwords on things. We wanted people just to be able to go into our SharePoint and get signposting resources, see all of the things we've got in our wellbeing hub without anyone else knowing. So when we were in the offices, we could leave little booklets around and people could just take them. But now we're online, obviously that's had to change. So we've built a wellbeing hub on SharePoint. It is super simple. It's literally a folder with resources in, which are hopefully nicely labelled for people. And we've put a wellbeing channel on Teams as well. That's what we tend to use. And anyone can post any wellbeing ideas in there. And then the other thing we've started to do as well, which again, we've really seen in the past 6 months have a great impact, was setting expectations around that right from the start. So if you apply to join us, if you see one of our vacancies, on our recruitment page, we have mental health and wellbeing as one of our key benefits. And then if you get a job with us, before you start, we send you an induction pack. And in there, it details every single part of our wellbeing offer. So the idea being that even before you've come in the door, virtually or not, that you know that this is important to us, and that whether or not you feel mentally well now, if at some point you don't, then we'll be there to help. Again, before, when we were in our buildings, the tour of the building on the first day, we would always point out our posters, which showed the mental health first aid team, because again, on your first day, obviously there's only some stuff that stays in your head because it's that massive information overload. But we just wanted to be like, look, the poster is here, there's one in the kitchen here, there's one over here. So people would at least remember they could go back and get that information. We have a HR induction as well, and we cover, again, all of the wellness bits in there. And as I said, our mental health first aiders do drop-in sessions. They are available at any time for people to call, but we offer drop-in sessions, and we just send those out as calendar invitations, so anyone knows exactly when they are. It's totally up to them if they drop in or not, but it's just really being obvious about what's available. The last thing we did as well was to make sure we were referencing mental health and wellbeing in our policies. So I think in most of our HR policies, we had a line somewhere in there saying that we had an EAP and here's the phone number. But actually, when we thought about it, that's not going to encourage anyone to ask for help. So every policy that we've rewritten now has a proper section on mental health and wellbeing. A lot of it is focused on support available, but it's in every policy. Previously, it was probably only in things like the wellbeing policy, maybe the alcohol and drugs policy, but now it's in absolutely everything. And our key policy change we did was in our performance management system. So we've moved away from appraisals, PDRs, and we now work on continuous feedback. And as part of that, wellbeing in itself is a separate meeting. So for us, making sure that how we actually work day to day includes wellness and wellbeing and mental health, again, has just really helped bring that topic to the front of everyone's mind all the time. So every time you have a one-to-one with your manager, it's now automatic that you would talk about that. So our guiding coalition then. So these are all the people in the organisation who help us make this work, because I think if we just tried to do it as a HR team, yeah, we'd probably get there in the end, but I don't think it would be as impactful, and I think it would take us probably about another 3 years. And actually what we found is we have lots of people who want to be involved in lots of different levels to help us break down stigma. So we've got the mental health first aiders, who are absolutely brilliant. We've got some times change employee champions. Lots of our line managers we knew wanted to be able to help. But we also found there was another group of people who didn't necessarily want to do a role, but might be happy to run a specific event. So for example, we had someone who was happy to contact the Samaritans and get them to come in and talk to us. We also realised that we had a group of people who didn't want to run anything, but would always support events we put on. And they're so useful, whether in a building or not. So in the office, if they're sat on one floor, they can easily bring that whole floor down to an event as well. But we found actually online, they still do that same job. They still, when they're in a team meeting, will say, oh, is everyone going to that event tomorrow? That sounds really good. And so actually identifying those people was really useful for us. And then there's obviously the wider support. So the Schwartz runs I was talking about earlier, they have a separate steering group. And we also have a culture club. So they look at the social side of everything we do at Blood Cancer UK. So all of those people together, that's probably about half of our organisation, minimum, I would say. And we thought as well, if we just do a top-down wellbeing strategy, that's not going to be anywhere near as good as if we do it bottom-up. Because again, if we're trying to break down stigma, we need to get everyone's voices involved. So the wellbeing strategy we created for 2020 and the next 2 years was created with all of those people. So although we did offer it out to the wider staff as well for ideas, we started with this group, pulled a framework together. And actually, I think I hadn't done it that way before. I was very used to it being led by HR. And doing it this way, it's so much better. We have so many more ideas. And I feel like we probably got to the issues that impacted our staff team much quicker, rather than us as a HR team guessing. And so this strategy, I think, is much better. The staff feedback is that it's working really well so far. And we know that because we do pulse surveys. So every quarter, we send out a survey to all staff. It has 10 questions. And each time we can obviously adapt them, but we quite consistently ask around mental health support, well-being, and people are telling us through this, as well as face-to-face as well, that they feel like the wellbeing strategy is really working. Obviously, culture change is change management. I think that probably the first thing I would say is, we all know that with culture change does take time, and I think our experience was you just keep going. Even if it feels like you might have periods of time where you're not getting much engagement, that doesn't mean people aren't listening, and it doesn't mean they're not accessing resources that you're providing. It might just mean that you have one event that not many people come to, and that's fine. Keep going with it. We definitely found that linking mental health and wellbeing to everything else really embeds it faster. So I think the best example we have of that is our values. So when we changed our name earlier in the year, we updated our organisational values as well. Alongside those values, we have a behaviour framework, which essentially is a list of things so that if you looked at it, you could say, yes, I am living that value in my day-to-day work. And one of our values is being united as a family. And that value on our behaviour framework specifically references wellbeing, and it references looking after your own mental health and wellbeing and also supporting others. So again, from the very first day you come into the organisation through to all the performance management work where we look at values, every time you look at it, again, mental health is right there. Also, probably a lot of you have been working on your equality, diversity and inclusion in your workplaces, especially based on recent events. We definitely have, and again, just building it into our work streams. And that really started because of when the Black Lives Matter movement was really coming to the fore. We saw that a lot of staff had varying emotional responses to that, and actually they really needed our wellbeing support. So as we move forward with our ED&I strategy, again, wellbeing will be a key point in all of those work streams. I think sticking with it during difficult times is really key. It's a bit like your values, isn't it? It's when everything's going well, it's easy. But actually, probably at some point this year, everyone's had a tough time, personally or at work, maybe both. As an organisation, as I said, we are unfortunately having to go through a redundancy process at the moment. And that is a really difficult time. But actually, it's the time when people really, really need you to be on top of the mental health support. I talked earlier about training our line managers, but actually we've been putting more support in around our staff team as well. So one of our trustees ran a series of training sessions for all our staff on how to manage change, and specifically around managing your emotional response to change, because for most of us, that is probably one of the hardest things. We also put in a change buddy system, and actually that was really simple, but it's worked really well. So we don't have a formal mentoring scheme, anything like that in place, but we wanted to be able to use all of our line managers because there's some really great experience in there to help people move through change. And essentially all we did was pair people up. So we pair people up outside of your line management structure. So for example, the change buddies I have, one's in fundraising, one's in research. And it's just another person you can talk to about how you're feeling about change. It might be how you're managing your mental health. It can be whatever that person needs, but it's been a really useful support system for us. And I guess the final thing is adapting to circumstances. So maybe it was in February, I had gone out to the organisation and said, right, I really want to add in these times change employee champions. And I had, I think, 6 people come forward. It's like, great, this is all going really well. And then obviously COVID happened, furlough happened, and all of my new times change champions ended up on furlough. So I had this amazing plan. It was all going to be great. They were going to do all these events. They're really great people, and they're going to be good at this. They're going to be really good at this role. And they are starting to come back off furlough now. But it just an example of, you know, you might have the best laid plans and have it all ready to go, but sometimes you just have to adapt. And then to finish up with then, so some of the challenges we've faced, and I think probably most of you have had some of these. We do have a small budget around mental health and wellbeing. It really is very small. I tend to do free stuff, to be honest, as I'm sure a lot of you do. But that's fine, because there is a lot of activities out there you can do. Again, not meaning to plug the Times Change website, but it's really good. There's lots of activities on there. And again, if anyone wants to be in touch afterwards and share ideas, I'd be really happy to do that. I think, like I said, for some of us, it can feel harder to talk about our own mental health than it is to talk to others about it. I think that's definitely something we found within the organisation, but that actually, because we've all done it together, and because the leadership team did step up and talk about it, that made it easier for other people who were finding it hard. As I say, around best laid plans, I've had a plan for everything kind of wellbeing strategy. I don't think anything has gone to plan, but it's still gone well. And I think, like I said, we're in a redundancy situation and people are still saying they feel supported, which was one of the key things we wanted to happen, because obviously it's always a horrible, horrible situation that nobody wants to find themselves in. But I think for us this year, we're 1.8 million down in funding. And as a charity that exists to fund medical research, it's just a really tough decision that has to be made. Having said that though, there are other things around COVID-19 that have been really challenging. So the furlough scheme in itself is challenging because we want those staff to come back, and we want them to come back and feel like they're still part of our family. And so looking after their wellbeing when they're on furlough has been really a priority for us, and we've spent a lot of time making sure we stay in touch with those people, making sure we've provided things to help them support their mental health. The enforced working from home, I think we'd all agree some bits of it are really great, but other bits of it not so much. And that lack of choice in particular has been a really key thing for some of our staff. So helping them manage that, trying to help staff maintain their resilience through a really tough time, that's been a challenge. But again, I think because we've pulled together as a team, that's really helped. And also different communication styles. So previous to this, I would have said, of course we can't do a masterclass online, that won't work. I can't do training online, like it doesn't work. But clearly it does, it definitely does. But it took us a little while to get used to that. It took us a little while, especially if anyone was based in our London office. It's a quite small building. Everyone was very used to seeing each other, and adapting so that you still keep that communication online was a challenge, but definitely is possible. And I think, again, has had a really positive impact overall for the staff team around maintaining mental health, but also still on breaking down that stigma around talking about it. And I think, yeah, as an organisation, we've learned so much from it, and most of it positive, fingers crossed. That is me done, really. I just wanted to flag up that September is Blood Cancer Awareness Month. So you might not know there's actually over 100 types of blood cancer. And if you get a chance to have a look on our website, maybe even if you just have a look at the signs and symptoms, because for most of us, you're probably not aware of what they are. And if you'd like to get in touch afterwards to share ideas, anything like that, I'd love to do that. I'm on LinkedIn. Jess Badley is a quite uncommon name, so you'll probably find me quite easily. Or if not, my email is there as well. Thank you very much.
Jess, thank you so much. I'm just going to see if we can swap the screen share, which we can. So, I mean, yeah, first of all, Jess, thank you so much. I think what really came across to me there was the kind of honesty, as well as the insight that you gave into some of the actions that you've been implementing. And yeah, I think it came across and gave a really kind of thorough understanding of what you've been doing. I'm just having a look at the chat feature here. Let's just go back. I didn't see any questions roll in. So what I'll do is I'll just open it up. If anyone does have a particular question, then if you want to unmute yourself and put that across to Jess now, that would be great. We have got a question from Flavia. Flavia's question is, Jess, could you please talk more about how you're managing redundancies and how the redundancies management plan and any support for staff at risk of redundancy specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so maybe actually if I talk about the support, because that is freshest on my mind, having just communicated that to everyone. So throughout the process, we've tried to be really, really clear with everyone that mental health is really key. Of course, that is a really difficult situation. So it's difficult for the managers who are leading the process, and it's really, really difficult for the person going through it. So We have things like the exec open door sessions I talked about. Also, our mental health first aiders kind of upped their presence. So we previously were like, there was once a week, there was a drop-in. We upped that to twice a week. And also then at those Wednesday morning meetings, what we did was make sure as much as possible, one of us would say, oh, just as a reminder, we're here. You can talk to us about anything. And we also have a wellbeing newsletter that we send around monthly. And in that, again, just flagging that with people. One of the things that worked really well for us as well was just making sure that all the line managers put in a time during the redundancy process to talk to their teams individually. So yes, a lot of the communications obviously goes out by paperwork or as a whole staff team, but of course you don't get any discussion that way, and it doesn't lend itself to questions. So every line manager in their team meetings then made sure there was time on the agenda to talk about the consultation, and that might be really technical questions, but what we found was most of the time it was people talking around how they were feeling about it and actually giving people that space to talk about it, because usually during it you don't have the answers, but you can listen, and you can definitely empathise with how people might be feeling. So that was really key for us. In terms of really practical support, we have flagged our employee assistance programme a lot. I think I must have gone over that 17 times with our staff team. They must be sick to death of it, but we've definitely seen an uptake as that, because more people are ringing the EAP or using the online service as a result of me constantly talking about it. We've also offered our HR team, in terms of really practical support, interview prep, CV and LinkedIn reviews, and also if people want it, career coaching, as in, for example, we're a charity. There are some skills in a charity which are very transferable across sectors, so HR, finance, etc. There are other, I guess, well, professions within the charity sector, so fundraising, which sometimes people think, oh, I'm not sure how that transfers to another sector, but actually there are so many transferable skills. So we've done quite a lot of work with the staff around how they do that and how they think about marketing their skills. And we were really lucky. One of our funders gave us not loads of money, but some money when they heard about our redundancies, to also use an external coach to do that. So we've also been able to offer a 60-minute session with an external coach so that people can access that as well. And obviously for some people that's better. Some people prefer talking to us as HR team because they know us, but other people prefer that external input. So we've just tried to make sure that there is a real range of people to support, really.
Thanks, Jess. The questions are coming in thick and fast, and I'm conscious of time. So I'm just going to jump to the next one from Liz, who's asked a really good question. She says, how did you sustain communication and support through COVID with regards to mental health specifically?
So a bit of a mixture. So while we do use the Wednesday morning staff meeting a lot to do that, obviously people on furlough aren't there to watch that. So we'd set up separate email communication. So there's emails that go to staff who are at work, and then there is separate email communication that goes out to staff who are on furlough. So as I said, making sure that they were kept in touch is really important to us. So we have done that a lot. We've also tried to do some events as well. So for example, one of the sessions that I ran was a 1-hour session on wellbeing and resilience. Again, not mandatory, people can just choose to come along, but that again had a really high take up both from staff still at work and on furlough. And then the other thing we did was just to make sure we were trying to set up online social events. So I'm sure a lot of you have done the same thing, sort of like after work drinks, coffee mornings, all those sorts of things. And especially at the start of COVID and the lockdown, we made sure that one of the mental health first aiders was always at one of those events, just in case people wanted to talk about it. And actually we found at the start that was really helpful. And then as we've got on and we've sort of adapted, we've been less needed in that capacity, but people definitely still accessing that, I guess, the social element of it. That's been really key as well.
Jess, another question for you from Lee Sharp. He's asking, have staff been worried that any disclosures might be used against them? I know it would be illegal to do so, but traditionally that would be a concern.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's probably a key concern for everyone, isn't it, whenever they're in that position. I would really hope that they wouldn't. I definitely have had feedback from staff saying that when they have disclosed from interview stage onward, that they felt that's been really supported, and that they haven't felt like they've been at a disadvantage. We do offer X interviews when people leave, so I would hope that if anyone did feel like that would come back to us, and it hasn't. But we do try really hard to make sure that doesn't happen. And actually, so for an example of that would be at recruitment stage, if someone did disclose a mental health condition, our line managers would know how to handle that, because part of our training was specifically about that. Yeah, does that answer your question?
I'm just really conscious of time, and we have got a lot of questions kind of flooding in, which I'm really keen to get through as many as possible. So Jess, the next question is from KA. I think it's actually a really good question, which I was going to ask myself actually. And it is, has Jess had any experience or engaged with skeptical employees? So those not convinced of senior leadership and buy-in, basically.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, yeah, everywhere I've worked, but yes, here at Blood Cancer UK. And I think that stems from people that maybe have been in the organisation for a little while and have seen different managers, especially at senior level. And it is easy, isn't it, to say that you support something, but then to not do anything about it. So definitely when the first maybe 3 months when we started talking about wellbeing, there was absolutely some employees who were like, been there, done that, nothing will change. And so for me, what we have to do is show that it is changing. And the only way you can do that is that role modelling I was talking about at the start, really. But yes, absolutely, that we did have that. We did have people that thought, well, this will last for a week and then that'll be the next thing.
Thanks, Jess. We have another question from PEC Champions. So question is, how do we present ourselves to our employees? So they've got 75 employees, site-based and office-based, as the approachable, trustworthy champions that we are, and not just being nosy?
Oh, that's a really good question. We've tried to do it so that we are seen as available and supportive. So, and from a HR perspective, sometimes people don't trust HR from previous experience. I would hope that people would not say that about my team now, but absolutely, yeah, I can see why people might think, well, why are you asking me that? But I think if you make it normal to ask about mental health, then it gets rid of that idea that you're sort of seeing what's going on with people and being nosy. And I think just consistently being available for people, whether that's by email or whether you're going onto sites, if you've got people back in the workplace, if you're there consistently, then I really think people start to see that you mean it, and that if they do come to you, that you'll be helpful.
Thanks, Jess. We've got another question from Annabelle Naismith. So first of all, thanks for sharing all the info, Jess, and a good question, I think, here. So did you use a mental health first aider or someone trained to deliver the training to line managers?
Yes, so I'm a mental health first aider and I delivered the training. Had I not been, we still would have done the training anyway, but I think it definitely helped us that I had the training and had done other bits as well. But we would have still delivered it anyway had I not had any training on.
Perfect. Kim's asking a question as well. She says, you mentioned that you have access, or easy access rather, to resources. What types of things do you have in that folder? I was worried it could be information overload. There's a lot of resources out there, which is absolutely true, or could encourage self-diagnosis, or people looking at these resources and not talking about or raising anything with the mental health first aiders or line managers.
Yes, and I think that absolutely can happen, but I think what we found is we do have some employees who right now or in the past are not at a point where they feel comfortable to talk to someone yet. But I feel like if we give them information that we know is good, so for example, we have a signposting sheet which gives websites and telephone numbers of external agencies so that people can get what we know is going to be good information and good advice. I guess in terms of information overload, it's up to them if they go into the Wellbeing Hub. We've tried to split it out so it has things like internal resources, external resources, things like that. So I hope it's very simply laid out for people to navigate. it might be that people never talk to us as a HR team or as mental health first aiders, but I think if we didn't provide any information when we relied on them coming to us, I think we'd miss people, because there is still that stigma, and it will take us, you know, many more months before we get to a stage where we might think most people are happy to talk about it. So I'd rather the information was there, because I know it's good.
Thanks, Jess. And I think in that similar vein of talking about mental health issues, Samantha's asked a really good question here. She says, thanks, Jess. Did you find that once people started to share their personal experiences and stories via blogs, etc., that others followed suit? We have some very engaged people, but others who are just not interested.
Yes, absolutely. And I think we'd be the same. I think we definitely found that interest in the topic overall went up quite quickly. I think when we had people sharing stories, yes, it made some other people share, but that's still quite a hard thing for a lot of people to do, especially in a public forum. Some people aren't comfortable speaking publicly about anything, never mind a personal experience. But I think when we were asking people if they felt supported, if they knew where to get resources, that number started shooting up really positively. So I think even if not everyone is sharing a story, that doesn't mean that you're not having a really great impact.
Thanks, Jess. There is a quick question from Kim, for myself, which is, will we be sharing the slides and the Q&A responses? Yes, absolutely. In case you missed it at the start, we are recording the presentation, and we're going to upload it to the Time to Change website, so you can revisit or perhaps share with colleagues. We do have 2 or 3 minutes, I think. If anyone hasn't put a question into the chat, I'm happy to open up the room if you want to unmute yourself and put a question across to Jess before we look at wrapping up. Okay. So in that case, first of all, thank you to everyone for joining us today. As I said at the start of the session, we would have loved to have seen you in person. Fortunately, we can't do that at the moment, but we really do hope that you find these valuable. We're going to be running them until the end of the year. So we hope to see you again soon. And most importantly, I think a huge thank you to Jess for taking the time to put this presentation together and deliver it today and facilitate the Q&A with us. As I said after the presentation, I think what came across was a really honest insight of what you've been up to and the challenges you've faced and the work you've done. I personally find it really interesting, and I'm sure everyone else did as well. So very quickly, just before we completely wrap up, you should any second now get a poll pop up on the screen. It's just a very, very quick piece of feedback, which Runa should be able to share with us now. Once that does pop up, what I would ask is if you could just fill that out for us. Let's see if I can do it myself. There we go. So if you wouldn't mind just submitting your answer there, that'd be hugely appreciated. Feedback, of course, is really important to us. And as you can see on the screen there, if you do have any questions, please do reach out to us. The best email to reach us on is employers@time-to-change.org.uk. More than happy to pick up any of the conversations that have been discussed here today, or answer kind of any more questions, broadly speaking, around the programme and the future there. But that's it really. So again, just a huge, huge thank you to Jess, and a huge thank you for being here with us today. And we hope you found it valuable, and we'll speak to you soon. Thank you.